Some films are remembered for their stories, and then there are films remembered for the shadows behind the scenes. Shadows so heavy, they change the entire legacy of a movie forever. Twilight Zone. The movie from 1983 is one of those rare, unsettling cases. A film that came from a place of nostalgia and creativity, but left behind a history that feels like something ripped straight out of the darkest corners of Rod Serling's imagination. Before the cameras ever rolled, the movie had one mission: bring the magic of the Twilight Zone to the big screen. 4 directors, each with their own unique style, were invited into the project. John Landis, Steven Spielberg, Joe Dante, and George Miller. A lineup so strong it felt almost impossible for the film to fail. Audiences were ready to revisit the eerie morality tales that defined a generation. But somewhere along the way, fate intervened in a way no one could have predicted. The film opens with that classic Twilight Zone tone, a mixture of mystery and playful suspense. But the story that truly defines the film isn't the one you see on screen. It's the one that happened during the making of the very first segment, a story that cast a long, dark shadow over Hollywood and changed film safety standards forever. A story almost too tragic to believe. But before we reach that turning point, the movie draws us into its anthology world piece by piece. Each segment reimagines an episode from the original series. Joe Dante brings his trademark surreal energy. George Miller turns the Nightmare at 20,000 Feet remake into one of the most chaotic, pulse-racing airplane sequences ever shot. Spielberg offers a warm, dreamlike reflection on aging and childhood wonder. Every director adds their own fingerprint to the project. The tone shifts from whimsical to terrifying, from heartfelt to existential, just like the original show. It's a kaleidoscope of moods that feels unmistakably like the Twilight Zone brought into the neon glow of the 80s. But the real heartbeat of the film rests in the first segment, the one directed by John Landis, a segment about hatred, prejudice, and consequences. A story meant to critique racism, but instead became the center of a tragedy that Hollywood is still haunted by. Actor Vic Morrow played a bitter, angry man forced to confront the harm caused by his own actions. It was dark, emotional, and ambitious, but no one knew what was coming. And when it came, it would change everything. During the filming of a climactic helicopter scene, something went horribly wrong. Special effects were miscalculated, explosions fired too close. The helicopter lost control, and in just a few seconds that can barely be described, the lives of Vic Morrow and 2 child actors, Mika Dinley and Renee Chen, were taken. It was the kind of tragedy that shouldn't happen on a film set, the kind that feels like it belongs to fiction, yet was painfully real. Hollywood had always been a place of controlled danger, but this shattered the illusion. Nothing could ever fully repair what happened. Production froze. Investigations began. Lawsuits unfolded. The industry was shaken. Directors across Hollywood were forced to confront the responsibilities and risks of filmmaking on a level they never had before. And while the film eventually continued, its meaning changed. What was once supposed to be a tribute to a beloved TV series now carried a weight it never asked for. The final film hit theaters that summer, a strange blend of wonder, fear, and tragedy. Some audiences watched it without knowing what had happened. Others couldn't separate the stories on screen from the story behind the camera. The marketing avoided the subject entirely, of course, but the shadow was there, in every frame of the first segment, in every quiet scene where Vic Morrow appeared, In every moment, the film tried to entertain an audience whose innocence had already been shattered. But even with all of this, the film still manages to offer moments that feel unmistakably Twilight Zone. Joe Dante's segment turns a child's imagination into a surreal nightmare house. Spielberg's portion glows with a melancholy warmth. And George Miller's explosive airplane sequence, with John Lithgow melting down at 20,000 feet, remains one of the most intense short-form horror pieces of the decade. It's a film of contrast, innocence and darkness, magic and tragedy, nostalgia and reality. A film caught between the dream it wanted to be and the nightmare it accidentally became. In the years since its release, Twilight Zone, the movie has evolved into something complicated. It's impossible to discuss it without acknowledging the tragedy. It's impossible to appreciate the artistry without sensing the weight behind it. The film became a catalyst for major improvements in set safety, child labor regulations, and oversight of dangerous stunts. And while that doesn't erase the pain, nothing ever truly can, it stands as a reminder of why those changes were necessary. But beyond the technical reforms, the movie forces us to confront something deeper: the thin line between illusion and reality. Cinema often feels untouchable, magical, distant, unreal. But moments like this snap that illusion in half. They remind us that behind every camera is a human being. Behind every stunt is a risk. Behind every story is a responsibility. And behind every frame of Twilight Zone, the movie is a lesson written in tragedy. Yet for all of its darkness, the film still resonates with a strange kind of beauty. Because at its core, it's built from the same DNA Rod Serling used in the 1960s. Stories about morality, consequences, and the human condition. Stories that twist your expectations and make you think twice about the world around you. And maybe that's why people still revisit the film decades later. Not out of morbid curiosity, but because it captures the essence of what made the Twilight Zone timeless. As the narration echoes in your memory, you unlock this door with the key of imagination. The film becomes more than a movie. It becomes a reflection, a haunting, fragile, bittersweet reminder of how thin the line can be between art and danger, between fiction and reality, between a dream and a nightmare. And in a way, that's the most Twilight Zone thing of all.